Welcome, everyone, to episode 19 of the Rooster's Crow.
Yes, thank you, Carter. So, episode number 19, we have the return of our first guest, a dear friend of mine, Neil DeGraide of Dirt Poor Robins. He is releasing some new material. He's got a lot of projects in the work. He's got a movie coming up, and he's got a kind of a best of CD that's out, and he's got a new single that I'm going to link to the description. So, guys, please check it out and go and get his stuff. It's really, really wonderful. Well done and meaningful and important. So Neil and I tied just a chat that we didn't come up with any topics prior to, and we just had a fun discussion that I hope you guys will enjoy, as we both did very much. So without further ado, Carter and I give to you guys episode number 19
of the Rooster Crow.
Mr. Neil DeGraide. Thanks. God bless. All right.
Being recorded.
I actually never heard that before. That's kind of strange.
Yeah, that was fun.
But hey, Neil, so I'm excited to have you back. So my first guest on the Rooster's Crow podcast was Neil DeGraide, and I'm so happy to have you back, my brother. How are you?
Thanks, man. I've really been enjoying your podcast. I mean, I work on audio for a living, so it's hard to listen to podcasts. But whenever I see something come up of yours, I know it's always worth my time.
Oh, thank you.
And so I've been really enjoying that podcast a lot.
You literally showed me how to use this gain function here on this microphone. So that's your handiwork coming through.
You know, I'm blushing because that was such a high skilled thing that only I could have helped you with.
Did you see the blooper reel?
Yeah, I did. I was shocked you posted that. That came up, and it was like I was about to fall asleep, and I just clicked on YouTube to see what had been posted, and there was a blooper reel. I was like, "Oh no!" I was testing the microphone.
That was hilarious. I had to post that.
Yeah, that was good.
That's a tremendous beard, by the way, man. Nice.
Well, I'm growing. It's about to come off. It's getting a little ZZ Top.
Yeah.
But I do fit in well where I live. I live in a little farm town here outside of Louisville called LaGrange. Mm-hmm. And, I work out of a trailer now. My studio's in a trailer, and I have this beard. And so I feel right at home here, but it's getting a little ZZ Top. I'm currently working on a film, and I have a small part for myself in it. And I actually have to have an old version of myself and a young version of myself. So I've let everything go gray and long. Mm-hmm. And if we talk next week, this is going to be temporarily dyed and shorter. So, but the mustache will still be curving in all its glory, hopefully.
So that is a glorious mustache, man. Did you dye that part, or is that part just?
No, it's weird, right? Isn't that weird? Like I still have
part, right? Symbolism happens, right? The top part is symbol. Does the same thing the bottom part does, right? You got the
do
silver.
I have my glasses? So a weird thing happened. I have these glasses, and nope, they're not in here. Darn it! So I bought new glasses. I didn't realize I must have done it unconsciously because it goes from brown to gray, to brown to gray, and my glasses go from brown to gray. And it's just weird. I didn't mean to do it. So my head kind of looks exactly the same upside down as it does right side up, which
as above, so below.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but that's what happened. So, yeah, I mean, this is riveting content we've started with. We're talking about, hey, if you want to get more content from a bearded guy in a trailer in Kentucky,
you don't want to bury the lead. Now. You don't want to bury the lead, man. So let's hit them with it right over their head.
That's right. Yeah, let's just get this out in the open and express what it's really all about.
So you're back in Kentucky. Are you at the same place you were before you left? Like, and traveled and...
No, close. I mean, I kind of sold off everything last year. So the economic crisis that seems to be approaching right now, we kind of had a glimpse of it. We were like, oh my gosh, this real estate bubble can't last forever. So, and we're not interested in, I'm always have the lookout for like debt entrapment cycles. And this really feels like a debt entrapment cycle. Not that there's like some grand conspiracy. It's just one of those things you get stuck in sometimes. So you get inflation, housing market gets too high, building materials are too high. No one can afford anything. And everything slows down. So we kind of sold off our properties, and we moved into an unoccupied home on my father-in-law's farm, and it is beautiful out here. And it's a smaller house for us, but that's good because we're trying to get more into like asceticism and not just indulging ourselves at every moment, not experiencing more comfort than we need. So this was like step one. We sold off like 2/3 of our property and our furniture, and just kind of went out here and are going a little monastic during this time. I mean, 2020 was a perfect time to get a little more monastic, because you were kind of forced to one way or the other. So instead of just falling asleep to Netflix every night and playing video games while you're out of work or can't go anywhere, we decided that we were going to read a lot and and start to fast and do things like that. I don't like to talk about fasting much. I don't think you're supposed to. So,
yeah, well, I don't know if it's, what, that's funny you brought that up. Is it, your personal fasting, right? Maybe you shouldn't talk about like, you don't want to be prideful, or, talk about just like talk about praying in a sense, right? But in general, I don't think it's the case for in general talking about fasting, right?
Yeah. The reasons for it. I mean, if I was going to talk about in that situation, we fast. There's an obvious reason to fast, and that is to like actually not have to give in to your appetites, right? So one of the problems about being a human is that there's these lower functions of us that have appetites and desires, and if we aren't skilled at stopping those, we become addicts of all kinds of things, and then so our lower impulses will reprogram our mind, so our mind is actually serving these lower impulses. So that's a great aspect of fasting, is being able to say, no, you don't get exactly what you want, but I'm not going to starve you to death, but you're going to get what you need. And then the two really important parts of it for us are the idea of expediency. Fast doesn't necessarily mean you eat nothing. Sometimes it just means you eat quickly and you don't necessarily eat until you're full. And that gives you more time for prayer and other things that are important. And then also fasting to save money. So in that money you save, you give, right? So don't want to say how much it is, but after a couple of meals, you go a little lighter, especially as a family or something like that, man, like it adds up, and you can really make a difference for someone who doesn't have as much. So those are the real important parts of fasting, I think, from what I've understood.
Are you doing like the Orthodox Wednesday, Friday? Or more than that, or
kind of here and there. So it depends on what I have to do and where I have to go. I don't do very well on a vegan diet. I like my family's like apparently some Nordic genes in us, and so Vikings disease runs in our family. And I'm not a doctor or nutritionist, but I keep reading about how the Nordic folks had the Vikings had a animal husbandry diet of like elk and cheese, and there weren't vegetables, and so the adaptation of the body to those things is important. But who knows, like I don't know who to trust on any of this stuff, but I do know I feel a lot better when I go that route. So I really need a lot of creative energy, and the problem with fasting is it does kind of sap my mental energy a little bit. You have to give up something. So I always play it by ear. I'm like, if I'm not being productive enough, I might go a little more into the food department, so I'm not distracted all day long when I have a job to do. But yeah, we are getting chrismated into the Eastern Orthodox Church, which if you're not familiar with the word, it's the same as confirmation in the Catholic Church, on June 6th. So our family's really excited about that. It's been a really great journey. It's been a long journey to this. I mean, stuff came on my radar a long time ago, and I think I was just so conditioned to not see churches that had a liturgy or a practical tradition or a large T tradition as important, or that those things were just like excessive or controlling or legalistic. And I just had my head around that the wrong way. And it took me a while to sort of rewrite and see the value in actually having specific practices. And
so how long is a while? Well, it's a time frame here when you started, this Orthodoxy thing seems pretty neat.
So it's funny. My wife was like in high school, we've been married 21 years. She was like painting icons. She didn't even know what they were, but she loved them. She loved all that stuff. And she was always buying them. We had them in our house. And I grew up Catholic, and it was a kind of a weird parish. I don't know what it's like for everybody with Catholicism, but it was not a great, lively religious experience for me as a kid. And so I moved away from that. And so I would say we hung around evangelical churches most of our marriage. And I started getting into symbolism a little bit like Jonathan and his brother did, but not for the same reason, where they were trying to understand this ancient cosmology. I was trying to create art that I liked and was moved by. And I was it helped me escape this sort of what I felt like was like this superficial pop cycle that everybody was kind of commenting on, where it was about relationships and domestic things. And I mean, you get into really low pop now where, people are just going to the thing that gets the biggest reaction immediately. There's no sense of how to carve beauty out of a lyric and bring an audience there with you. So I started personifying all these patterns I was seeing in the world and discussing them as if they had a will and a volition and putting it into songs. And I tell you what, it unlocked something in me where I ever since have not had a shortage of an idea. The problem is that when I was looking at the world that way and starting to look at this kind of these, this like more biblical cosmology is what it turned out to be. And it was just happening by intuition. The more I started to, when I was interacting with it, I didn't think of it as the right way to see the world. I just saw it as an effective way to see the world. So it wasn't until I'd say around 2015, 2016, I started to discover some authors and some things on YouTube where people were discussing this stuff, and started to see that in the, even in the Bible, that I think it was the wrong way to see what their perspective was as just purely monotheism. Let's just take, Israel. It seemed to be more like they were mono worshipers, but they saw all these other religions and spirits and things out there as actual things that were competing. And so that was very helpful. And I think Jonathan was really the nail in the coffin for me. And maybe Father Stephen DeYoung, his podcast, one of his podcasts I started listening to. So it was like, suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, like what I've been participating in as an artist and integrating my faith into as an artist was actually a recapturing of what had been going on in the past that modernity has stripped away. So it was really exciting to like hear someone who had an even more coherent system than I was working with. I was working basically off of intuition. I wasn't trying to systematize it. But what the funny thing was, is as I started to understand it more explicitly, not implicitly, not as just an intuition, when I went back and looked at the work I was doing that started there, it was all symbolically coherent within the with what I was starting to understand explicitly. So I was really excited. And so I really started to trust the intuitive process, like in how I was getting to that process and how I wasn't trying to force things in a direction. I was letting them come to me and waiting for things to fit together properly before I moved on by intuition. So, I mean, even a situation like I'm working on a film right now, and a script I had the story idea, and I didn't want to engage, like slow down the process and engage the symbolism consciously. I just wanted to let the story come out intuitively. So I talked to Jonathan Peugeot about it, and I was like, hey, can you help me with the story? And, he jumped in and really helped tighten things up where I didn't have to slow my intuition down. And it turned out a lot of it he was already jiving with. And it was more like we got into these kind of yes and conversations where it's like, oh, that's great. And what about if you added this? And what about we brought this element in? So we were able to get really far, and the screenplay was tied up in a very short period of time.
Hold on, let me let my dog out. He's whining and pining. Hold on.
Don't like that? He's at the door behind you. I just wanted him to jump up and down and distract the whole episode. Sure, this will be edited out, but this is for James' ears only. He's a very handsome Greek man. Oh, hi.
Sorry, man. I don't want to pepper the conversation with the
dog,
the little whining and hampering. He's actually been with me in every podcast. He just hangs with me, but I got the kids out there, and they're usually not kind of out there going crazy. So he wants to. He stalks them for food. He's got a pretty determined method. It's pretty impressive, actually.
We've got a cat like that. I really want a dog, but I think we travel too much. I really want a dog.
So a cat's more portable?
Ready. Well, so the cat, we just dump it off with friends that have cats, and it has play dates for a month at a time if we travel. So, because we're hoping to go to Israel later this year if there's not bombings, and I wanted to go to formerly known as Constantinople. I wanted to do Istanbul, Jerusalem, and Mount Athos. So I was hoping to do that this year.
Me too. I think I'll meet you at Mount Athos. I was going to try to go next month to my cousin's getting married up there, and I was like, you know what, I can go for 5 days, but I can't find my passport. It's like, if I have the family's passport in a bundle, right? My wife's like, hey, yours is the only one missing. I'm like, really? So I want to get to Greece, so maybe I'll meet you there. Let me know when you're going there.
Speak any Greek?
Yeah, I'm fluent. Yeah, got most of
Oh,
my family
good.
is
Let's go.
my
You're
family's
in.
from
You're our guide.
my family's from about an hour out of Mount Athos. That's where
Oh,
my
that's
family's from
amazing.
there. Yeah, so I really want to go. I didn't the it's called Chalkidiki is the area there, and there's three legs. The third leg is called Uranopoli. Urano means the heaven. Poli means obviously the town or state. So the state of heaven there is where Mount Athos is on. And yeah, I definitely want to go. My 6-year-old wants to go. I mean, he keeps asking me, "What
It
are we
really
gonna
looks
do?"
like that. I hadn't heard of Athos until like 2018. Like I didn't even know it
Yeah.
was a place. Like
Mm.
it's crazy, like how much that stuff is hidden from us in the West sometimes.
In the West,
Um,
I didn't know. Seriously, like I didn't know. I knew about it, but I had no idea what it was for until
well, it's not like they got a
5 years
PR guy
ago.
out there. So like all these monks who are praying for us constantly for the last 1,000 years have
Yeah.
sent a PR man out in the world and care that we know. So
Well,
it's
I'm named after Ios Dimitrios, who's the patron saint of Thessaloniki, which is the town,
yeah,
village. Right? Didn't know the story about it. It was my grandpa's name, my grandpa, and it's my son's middle name. And then just coming up on the story of his story and how what happened. It's just absolutely beautiful and
that's
amazing.
rad.
It's
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah,
it's crazy. So lots to dig into, kind of it and to look through our past and my family's past there, which I'm blessed to have the opportunity to do so because of whatever it is that's happening now.
that's
This
fun.
whole like
Yeah,
orthodoxy, right? Like what the? It's less than 1% of the religious attendance, church attendance in
350 million worldwide.
no, I mean
I think my
America.
church has like 50 catechumens.
In
So
America, right?
it's
Less than
crazy.
1%.
Yeah.
Almost a good majority of the people that I've talked to, last three, one was a 26-year-old, another one was a young guy. Both of them, and since 2019, have become Orthodox. Like the craziest thing. And I'm about to talk with someone who I followed for a while who does psychedelic videos. I don't know if you know him, your mate Tom. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
so
don't know, like
he
know him.
commented on one of my conversations. Is like, that's amazing conversation. I was like, what? I'm like, okay, cool, dude. You want to have a chat? He's like, yeah. He hit me back. He's like, yeah, I'd love to. I've left my kind of new age situation. I'm really interested in orthodoxy. I'm like, what? Like, so many different people from so many different angles are coming towards orthodoxy, which is like, it's really quite fascinating and interesting, right? And then I was talking to my
Yeah.
wife, like orthodoxy means it's the right way to worship, right? There
Or
are many
yeah,
ways.
right.
Ortho means straight, right? Doxy means worship or glory. So it's the right way to glorify God. It's the most accurate way to glorify God. You can glorify God in many ways. They're not, it's not other ways are wrong, but orthodoxy, the tradition, is the right way to glorify God in a sense. And I think it's an
Yeah.
interesting way to think of it. Since
Well, that could be a fun conversation to talk about. So one of the things I really haven't done in the past. So I've been an artist, and because I haven't been a Christian artist, meaning that I've been a Christian. I've believed in Christ for a long time, but I didn't see. Well, let's just take my band, Dirt Poor Robins. And I didn't see what we were doing as Christian art, although I think if you tell a good story, or anybody can do this, or Jonathan's done this in some of his videos too, is that you can see the logos in every good story in one way or another.
Mhm.
So I mean, what we were doing was not intentionally, just as a result of how I collect the world through my intuition, was logocentric.
Mhm.
um but I haven't discussed it much, but there's this weird thing that's happened to me now, like as I'm been moving towards Eastern Orthodoxy, and we can talk about some of the things that motivated me towards this, if you'd like,
Yes,
if you
please.
want to steer the conversation that way. So, as I started to move towards it, I just became like so excited to talk about it with everybody, like without trying,
Mhm.
and everyone's interested. Like no one's not. I don't understand. Like I couldn't imagine 10 years ago me talking about any of the things I'm talking with people, and the types of people who are just like, oh yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that. That was interesting. So one of the things that really got me is, I'm involved in these Protestant churches, and the notion that I couldn't go back in time more than like 300 years for this one church I was in, and I couldn't have found anyone who believed what we believed or was doing what we did. And so I was like, maybe is that an epistemological test for, is this a problem? And I was like, well, let me look into this more. And so I start going backwards. And so my education really stopped at the apostles and begins again with Martin Luther. So that was all I knew. I had no idea. Like, I thought that basically the apostles in their dying breaths threw a really long pass to Martin Luther. And, and he brought us into the end zone, into the future. And so as I really went on this quest to, like, what were they doing before? What did people believe? And then getting backwards and getting into things, it was like, oh my gosh, I was expecting to find this very informal, very impromptu way of worship where people were just on fire. It's like might have been the words you use, like they got a flame of fire on their head, and that they were just naturally getting together and nobody had to tell them to do anything. They just did all the right things, and their hearts were in the right place, and they were able to survive this persecution just by this informality, like this informal, natural hippie experience or something like that. I had this notion, but when I dug in, I was like, oh my, that's not at all what was going on. Like, they started meeting in the synagogues immediately. There was, there's lots of documentation of, oh, gee, the specific, like, how many times you pray the Lord's Prayer, how many times do we dunk someone when we baptism, what kind of, in baptism, what kind of water, even the veneration of the saints. And then the other kicker was, I'd never thought about it. I'd studied a little bit, like the Nicene councils and the canonization of the Bible, but just enough for me to feel like pretty good about its authenticity. Mm-hmm. And then, like, when you get back and you realize, like, so the Orthodox Church could brag like this. They could be like, oh, you're not Orthodox, but you've been reading one of our most popular published books of all time. It's like the Bible. It's like, what do you mean the Bible? It's like, yeah, the people that canonize the Bible that you think is infallible, or like your tradition says is infallible, they were wearing robes and venerating icons and swinging incense. And I was like, what? They were priests and they were bishops. And then it started to make me question everything. Like, yeah, how do you have the authority to start a church, and where does that come from? And they had just, a deeper view of what was happening, and a much richer tradition than I ever imagined. And over time, the more I engaged, the more what I was already doing just felt anemic. And, like, I don't want to diss anybody. They're all great people. There was something being omitted beyond things that were just like slightly off emphases. So, that's kind of like that in a nutshell. That's kind of what got me to really dig into it. And then I just had to get over certain obstacles. And some of those things were things I was conditioned to reject. And other things were things that are hard to understand until you're a part of the church for a long time. Mm-hmm. I've been in person going for, a year and a half, and some things are finally sinking in, because you have to be there doing it to really understand it. Otherwise it just sounds alien to the modern world.
Now, do you go with the kids?
Yeah, my kids love it, I think.
How old are your kids?
So my youngest is 6. My oldest is 16. There's 4 of them total. I got one about turned 13 and another 9.
And you get
my youngest all to go? 6. I just said that because of 16. I got that stuck in my head. I know he's 7. He's been 7 for a while, and he looks 8. So that was crazy. Yeah, 3 oldest are girls, and the youngest is a boy.
And they all go weekly with you?
Yeah, they did not like. I think they were having fun right away, because it felt like Hogwarts for Christians. So, there was something about it. And it's our St. Michael Orthodox Church is so beautiful. It's not like the most beautiful church in the world, but for anything you'd find around the Louisville area, it's you just step right out of time and space to go into the building. And I think that Kate and I, we had zero adaptation. I don't think most people have that experience, but we just sit there. They have an incredible choir. We just sat there and cried through the service, and our kids had a blast. And when the kids get bored too, they just start exploring all of the imaging on the walls. And it's such an experience to see so much of the church's history and the stories and the the figures that are in this I don't even want to use a mythological word for it, but it's something mythological about it that's true at the same time. And you're just engulfed in this image of what's happening. There's something to contemplate everywhere. It's just a super saturated solution of meaning. And it's been a really great experience. It's a little longer than the kids would probably like, right? But I mean, outside of that, the whole experience has been really brought us together as family. So that's been awesome.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's such an interesting experience. It's like an organic kind of process. There's people there, the priest is coming in and out, from behind the altar, and you're seeing people get up, and kids are running around, and like you're saying, so it's like it's this very serious thing that's happening, but there's also this kind of organic kind of milieu that's alive in a sense.
Right.
It's beautiful.
And well, if you're not, but I mean, I don't know if you grew up in it, but I didn't grow up in that.
Mhm.
And it's a lot more, there seems to be more symbolism drilled into it than in Catholicism. But they don't just believe things are merely symbols either, right? They're kind of both things. They're real and a symbol at the same time. So, but once you start to learn what's happening in tradition, you realize that at every corner and every turn, like the churches I was involved in before, almost like by comparison, aren't trying to communicate compared to how well refined the divine liturgy is, and how everything, even like, but these things are uncomfortable. When someone sees someone making the sign of the cross, they're like, well, you don't have to do that. And it's like, yeah, but every time we say this name, you want the name to be above every name.
Mhm.
It's like, well, I need to tell my body that, I need to tell my mind that. And then what they don't realize is like even the symbolism of how you hold your hand to represent the two natures of Christ and the Trinity,
Mhm.
and the way and like, so every little thing you're doing and where you're facing and where things are positioned, it's telling the big story. And for my mind, of course, like it was the first time I ever felt all of me engaged in the church. It wasn't like, well, these people are nice, but they're weird. This is kind of like a low grade college lecture. This is kind of bad pop music, but I mean, we're just trying our best and our hearts are what matters. And so, but it was always awkward. And I always felt like there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't like just pour my heart into it and do what other people were doing. And lo and behold, there was a place for me in this world. And it's that so far, it's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, and if you want a little window into what Neil's talking about here, I have to plug this a little bit. I don't get paid to, but
I just
Religion
got
of
that
the
in the mail.
Apostles, Orthodox Christianity and Christianity in the first century. Really, really wonderful book, and it's not for the advanced. Well, it's for those more kind of advanced, cultivated understanding of Orthodoxy, but those that are coming from it from other religions or denominations, and it doesn't denigrate other denominations. It just kind of talks about the roots
Right.
of Orthodox Christianity being kind of situated in the first 100 years and in the religion of the apostles, in a sense. So it's really wonderful.
Yeah, no, I feel bad too sometimes talking about it, because like to express what I'm understanding, I kind of have to put where I was in a less than ideal light. Right. And I don't want to do that. I just don't know how to get around it either at the same time, because like I maintain a lot of friendships of people that aren't involved in what we're doing. And I understand maybe that any level of confusion they have about what I'm involved in too at the same time, because it's not trying to be relevant. And everything we've been told is that your job is to be relevant. But I don't I think there's upside of relevance in the sense that like you want to be understandable to people, you want to go and meet them where they're at. The problem is a lot of what's happening in the world is not for the best reasons. So for us just to go populate those traditions and those practices with Christian lyrics isn't enough. And you can feel it. The art is not great. The art feels like a message forced into a form that has a symbolism of its own that's not working. Like they're not working together. Like even rock and roll, for example, like I'm a big rock fan, and but rock and roll really, like, it doesn't work unless it's rebellious in a way, like unless it's about this individualistic pushing against, going against the flow and pushing against the system and the man, if you will. And so, like, I mean, there is a type of, you could find a psalm that's kind of got a rock and roll theme to it, right? Every once in a while, but not all of it fits that. And then, so the patterns contradict sometimes. And so I think it's a problem. Relevance has become a problem when you just inhabit these things that were really just designed as a distraction from what things could really be, and what kind of beauty they could really point to, and how they could really draw the logos into our sights and show us how that's gathering in us, how they these other patterns are kind of substitutionary and distraction. Like you could see a drug, it's like it sometimes could be like a drug. Like a drug is distracting you from your problems or distracting you from something better you could pursue. And so by like inhabiting these lower patterns of music and art, I think that was the wrong place to land. And it's kind of, it's really given Christian art a bad name because again, they're just trying to deliver a message through these forms that were really meant as a distraction from what I believe was the real thing. And so they see Christian art as a substitution for secular art. And I think that's an absolute backwards way of thinking it. I don't, and when you think of it that way too, you end up with this like inferior product. Like you end up with something that's like Diet Coke, where it's like, sure, this might be safer for your kids to listen to, or, this won't make you fat.
Mhm.
But it's got a weird aftertaste and very little nutritional value. So we've had a real problem. Christianity, the brand of Christianity, has taken a serious hit due to relevance. Like it's achieved the opposite of what everybody hoped it would. Instead of just moving on after something glorious and transcendent and epic, it's gotten lower and lower and lower to now it's just moral, therapeutic. I don't even know, like just bad versions of pop. I can't do it. So I've never associated myself with it. I've tried to help. I've tried to help churches do music, and I've recorded on records like that. But I never wanted that to be my identity, because even when it went great and everybody was happy, there was still something just like, it's like we're left something off the table that could have been brought to the table. We didn't have access to it, and we didn't know what was missing, and we didn't know why. And so, but now I feel like when I participate in the divine liturgy, and oh my gosh, the musical tradition and the lyric tradition, it's the exact opposite experience. It just kind of creates this wonder and awe about what music can do and what music can be. And that's really hard to do for someone like me who's been doing music for so long. To actually have music move me again is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Like when you say relevant, like relevant to whom, right? Like, so it's like, and then I've heard, I think Jonathan maybe touched on this a bit, and I kind of been thinking about this idea of is how can you be Christian with what's happened to Christianity in the last 200 years? It's like with this rich organic soil of, transcendence in life, right? That was just paved over by layers of concrete, which is the, Enlightenment scientific way of thinking, right? The materialism, literally just materialism has been paved over, where there's no way for anything to grow, from the organic soil underneath it, right? So it's like even Christians, and this isn't to pass judgment, because I'm subject to this too. It's like even Christians aren't really believing, they're not believing. Even ones that go to, like, my hesitancy to go to church was like, I see all these people going to church, and I see their lives continue to be in shambles. I see them being jerks and, getting divorced, and just the priorities are jacked up. They're going to these buildings and saying that they believe in God, and you'd go to a friend's house and they have this, in this home we worship Christ, have like from a Home Goods,
right?
There,
like,
and it's like, but then you see how they live their lives, and this isn't a judgment, but it's like, why would you think that's something that would be advantageous in this world to get back to? But I think there are, just like through the cracks, there are just, plants or life can grow out of it. And I think that's happening now with this kind of revival or reorientation of Orthodoxy, which is this old, the old Christian tradition that hasn't really changed in 2,000 years, is suddenly attracting people from all over the world. And it's just really strange. I try to step out of it and look at that's happening. It's like, wow. And it seems like the world did end in 2012, that whole thing.
Right. No, right.
It actually happened.
Yeah, that's around the same time I started getting drawn to these things, because I was tired of this dull world, this filled with dull realities and dull descriptions of what's going on. So, I mean, I think I just brought up the story in someone else's podcast, and there's two people I like to pick on that I actually like. So I'll pick on them because I think I have permission to, because I actually like them. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson and Eric Weinstein. I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but I think they're smart guys. And I'm interested to hear their perspective at the very least. But they both appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast, and both got into sort of this same kind of idea where Joe was trying to push them past materialism. Like, so the idea of materialism, meaning that the world, everything comes from matter, and matter, everything emanated. Everything emerged from
Emerged,
that. Yeah, emanating is the opposite. So, and he's like, but people want to know why gravity. And Neil deGrasse Tyson was like, why ask why gravity? Like, who cares about why we live in a universe that has gravity? You know, the important thing is to understand gravity. Like, that's what's really interesting. And then Eric Weinstein brought up something like about against religions. Like, what's really interesting is he starts to talk about these mathematical numbers and the I forgot the name of the number system. I looked it up for a little while, but he starts talking about these just really boring crap. Like, I mean, I don't know how else we call it, but he's just describing, like, what's going on at the subatomic level. And there is a type of scientific interest, but here's the problem. Here's why they're wrong. That can never sustain mankind. Why? Because we all have access to this information. How many poems have you read using that sort of language? Like, how many movies that what's important in the movie is that there's a human, like if it's like Interstellar, it's that there's a human and a human perspective going out into space. It's not that they got the right details about how the universe physically works on a materialistic or mechanical cause in its mechanical causalities. And so when I look at songs and things, like, nobody's interested in these subjects as far as it moving them, and it could be a substitution for some sort of mythological narrative. It's such a short sight of these scientific materialistic types that I don't know how they don't see it, or if they're just kind of colorblind to those type of emotional categories, or how those things gather themselves in people. But I don't think that's ever going to be enough to sustain, oh, look, we have unity as a society and we have love. It's just not happening. And in fact, I think you see it failing, which is why people are more interested in these things, and why you see mysticism and spirituality and these kind of things, and mythology, even paganism, making a big comeback. Because materialism it couldn't deliver a narrative that could glue our hearts together as a people. It just couldn't. It's just not interesting enough.
Not for the humans, but Neil, for the machines. Like, right. Physics is a theology for the machine world, in a sense. Like, it's not about human hearts and unity and transcendence. It's about this very practical, technological, hyper technological singularity that where everybody's so hopefully moving towards, in a sense. So it's like
singularity. I know. I just watched a video on where robotic technology and AI is right now. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating what's coming. So I made a few predictions. I don't know if I told you this. I made a few predictions to friends about COVID, and it was last year. And I was like, all right, if we're going to become a globalist society, the problem is you can't find narrative energy from within. That's called entropy, meaning that if or like, just think about it in a practical sense. It's my body. If I don't eat things that are outside of me, if I don't get sunlight, water, and food that don't originate inside my own body, I will die shortly after. My body will consume itself until I die, or will not have the energy to sustain or host my spirit, and I'm gone. Mm-hmm. So as the world moves to become one thing, it has to go outside of itself to find narrative energy. Mm-hmm. And so one of my things was like, people had talked about how the masks aren't really masks, they're veils, right? Mm-hmm. They cover this part of our face, and that human beings have a tendency to be attracted towards things that like are symbolically what's actually happening. So, there's no coincidence that people are wearing masks, having trouble breathing, and people marching and yelling, "I can't breathe." There's no coincidence that we're being invited to a new normal, because veiling is what a bride does, or what you do when you're concealing your identity, mm-hmm. and the bride unveils to her new identity. So my wild guess was like, okay, the only thing we can possibly draw from is aliens. Like, mm-hmm. That's it. That's all they've got left. Now, I'm not a grand conspiracy theorist in the sense where I look at these patterns and I think there's a small group of people plotting our fate. I'm not saying that there isn't. I just don't know, right? I think that's where some conspiracy theorists get really off the rails, is trying to come up with like, no, because they see a reptilian pattern of like, so like, for example, spin is camouflage. It's narrative camouflage. So they're like, oh, if there's narrative camouflage being used consistently, that means there's a reptilian race controlling this whole narrative. And it's like, no, I get it symbolically, but I think you may have taken it too far. Anyway, my whole thing about aliens was I said, you watch, as soon as they start like saying, okay, you can take a mask off, they're going to start dropping alien stuff. And I was like, dang it, if they didn't do it in the same week. Like, they're like, oh, look at this Navy video of this incredible alien encounter, which is like, I have a better camera on my phone for one. Like, I don't know what they're saying about this, but I'm not seeing what they're all saying is happening. Like, from Fox News to other sources, they're like, this is legitimate, you know? And it's like, what are we seeing that we haven't seen 1,000 times before in these videos that's like so unverifiable, like a blob that's 5 pixels big, but suddenly it's like, oh, look, right? And so
it's like that was my dot,
thing.
like this, completely low resolution green dot. And CBS had just interviewing some military people, and the guys like, I saw this unidentified aircraft that broke the laws of physics every day for 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, really? That didn't sound the alarm that there's a technology that surpasses all of the military's technology. Like, and if I've been, into UFOs and aliens pretty much until the government says like, hey, this is kind of real. And I'm like, oh man, maybe it's not real, like, it's like, you can look through declassified, just doing a cursory view of declassified material. There has been this kind of alien sightings and a lot of interesting information. It's like, why are they letting that out now? Now, all of a sudden they're like, hey guys, well, we're just going to tell you randomly now of this 50 years of kind of knowing that we've seen and perceived these things. We're going to tell you now, right after this, right in this particular time. It's like, why would they do that now? And I think, there's this idea, it's like, they get to traumatize you, but in between the traumatizations, they have to have periods of quiescence where things kind of normalize for a bit before they hit you again. I think that you see it, global warming and the alarmism will be on the fore. And then I think there's going to be this kind of push towards normalization of alien technology, alien visits. If you want to go down the conspiratorial, right, ultimately to come up with, this narrative, this grand meta narrative that will ultimately act as something that will gut Christianity once and for all. And there will be this idea that there are aliens, and that was kind of way to build some pseudo religion to unite the world in a sense.
Yeah, right. So you said a lot right there. I'm watching closely because like, well, it's funny when like you're, a year out, you're like, this is what's going to happen. And then it does. You're like, oh, of course that's what's going to happen because this is how things go. So what's so interesting, so the alien narrative is really interesting to me, because I'm interested to see what it is. Are these hostile aliens, or do we need to unite over a threat, or do they have the answer to things like COVID and poverty, but they're waiting for us to get to a point of peace before we agree? Like, who knows what's going to come out next? But what's funny, if I want to comment on what you just said, there is this kind of modern, like scholarly historical look back at the past where they look at every civilization and they kind of interpret the morals and religion as someone's attempt to regulate behavior. Right. And I mean, that's fair to look at. Anytime you look at a law, like it's attempt to regulate behavior, but the idea is that like there's nobody had any genuine experiences. This was always like someone just kind of, exploiting the populace, or this kind of idea, or people just dismiss narrative as like this opiate of the masses or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people. Right? Yeah. Okay. So this is a couple of things to pay attention to for when you talk to your friends out there, is the people that tell you that are probably the first ones in line to believe aliens. Mm-hmm. Probably. And like the idea that they believe that like governments and people in power manipulate narratives to control behavior. That's what religion is. But aliens, no, it won't be that. This is legit. I wouldn't be surprised if what I'm saying right now is some sort of like heresy in the near future. Like I wouldn't be surprised. Like I wouldn't put anything past anyone. I remember like 4 weeks into COVID, that like our governor started some kind of like narc hotline where you could just call in and report suspicious activity due to COVID or people that weren't distancing or whatever. And I was like, could you imagine 4 weeks ago if someone told us there'd be a hotline to be like, I saw these neighbors hugging. It's like, it just happened so fast that I wouldn't put anything past it. So like what I'm saying right now could just like literally be like off the, like, you can't disbelieve in this narrative. We've all got to act or we're all in trouble. So, or it might be something that happens slower. I just thought it was really suspicious timing to like, okay, we're going to start backing this down and then we're going to start dropping this in. It's like, part of the new normal is aliens. Accept it, people. It's part of the new normal.
I think that, and I don't think this is conspiratorial. I mean, it's obvious. I think that, the leveraging of intelligence apparatuses and the different the intelligence agencies in the United States have been kind of leveraged against nations and peoples across the globe, and now it's just being turned on the American people through their partners or the branch of their unit as the media, right? This gaslighting, this kind of complete uncertainty surrounding every single topic, object, political, economical, whatever it is. It's the craziest thing or the most rational sounding thing. It's that you don't know. You never know. There's never clarity. And fake news is the point. The point is the disinformation. Like, that's not a happenstance. Right. It's because it keeps people kind of off balance and kind of out of sorts in a sense. So I was talking to a buddy at work today. And he's like, man, the world's got effed up, man. This is crazy. I'm like, but you're taken to what's coming from your scream as the world, right? Look around us. Life is pretty good, man. Like we have great relationships, good work here. We enjoy ourselves in a sense, but whatever comes through these screens, we look at it and it's like, oh, the world is going to shit. Like look at it as a movie. Like look at it as something that's entertaining for entertainment's sake. Like it's not real. Like Twitter's not real. It's just not.
No,
like,
it's not the real world of how things go. No, you're right. So it's funny because I got mainly outside of my band and my music, I got off all social media platforms. So I don't really read anything else. I don't really watch the news very much either. And I just happen to hear about this alien thing. I have a couple of friends where something really big happens. They're like, hey, you said this was going to happen. Check this out. So I got off Facebook because I thought my account was getting hacked, but it turns out, so this because I saw you in Florida in November, and I stayed in so many houses that I logged in like on a number of devices and just forgot to log out or accidentally say my password. So someone was messing with me somewhere, and it's kind of hilarious looking at it now. But at the time I was like paranoid, like how do these people keep getting into my account? And they were doing the dumbest stuff. Like they were doing it's really like, I want to give them a high five for it now and I was just like, Facebook isn't helping me. This is the worst. I'm getting off of this. And so I was so happy once I got off. Like I'm a happy dude, but it was like, I don't really get upset arguing with people. Like if I have a difference of opinion or online, like I always feel like I'm kind of just jabbing people with an elbow, but I don't realize that like this was a mistake I made. They're like walking around their house like everything I'm saying, I'm just kind of like, oh, we're having a funny little debate here. And these people are like wishing for my death and trying to deplatform me. And so I had no idea, but still, once I got out of the news cycle and I got off social media and I didn't have to check that stuff anymore, it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm unshackled. Like I didn't consider myself someone where that had any kind of effect on me at all. And as soon as I was like, oh my gosh, I just like upgraded my life. Like who knew it was going to be so great? But yeah, so what you're talking about with the news cycle and these things. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the sense that I'm like, there are people and they're meeting in this room and here's the name of these people and here's what they're really like and here's their plans. Like I'm not. I mean, so as being a part of the Christian tradition, we are conspired against. Like, I mean, everyone's conspired against by someone in one way or another. So it's not like conspiracies aren't real. It's not like people aren't trying to get you back. It's not like you won't meet some guy you were mean to in high school and he's really plotting your demise. It's like, these things can happen. I don't like to be paranoid and imagine that they are. But, so when I look at these things, I just watch the patterns. I don't try to figure out the human component on the other side. And I think that's why, so people who follow someone like Alex Jones, like I'm not a huge fan of Alex Jones. I think he's hilarious if you look at it like the WWE version of the news. But the people will say like, but he gets it right sometimes. It's like, yes, Alex Jones gets part of it right sometimes and part of it wrong all the time,
Mhm.
because he takes it to a point where he can't know. But if you just pay attention to the patterns and you look at, like, you can tell where patterns are going. You can tell if I throw a rock at a house, before that rock gets anywhere near the house, you know if it's going to hit or not. Its trajectory is obvious. So I think a lot of these things, the trajectory is just obvious. I don't know who's doing it. So as a Christian, um, we believe the world is a spirited place. And so I think that if these things are being coordinated, they're not within, people don't understand that they're being used to coordinate it, if you want to put it that way. So that kind of conspiracy, I'm like, yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I'll buy into that one. But the idea that there's 130,000 people at NASA all on the same page, it's like, no, I don't know how this is coming together. Like, that doesn't make sense. But the alien narrative is definitely one to watch, and it's going to be like moderately predictable what happens next, I think, if you pay close enough attention to patterns.
Yeah, I think we can kind of loop these two discussions together, right? We have this idea in
Yeah, we're just everywhere. I love it.
Christian
Yes.
Christian celestial mythology, right? You have the powers and
Yeah.
principalities, right?
Mhm.
Which are the beings that are at a higher level, malevolent, benevolent beings, angels and demons, is essentially, right? That are
Yeah.
over powers and principalities that are over the nations, right? And they have were put there by God, and they have since fallen. So there's fallen angels that are over the nations, in a sense, right?
That's the
And it
story.
seems like that the alien mythology is just new terms for the same phenomenon, right?
Yeah, it's
Now,
a alien stranger. It's the same kind of thing. The idea that's, something with strange principles to you. It's like, to be under the stranger is to be in a type of exile, because now
Mhm.
there's something more powerful or above you that has a different set of rules. And now it's going to be hard for you to match your theory of the universe to what it's like to live in the current universe. So there is something like an exile coming up, I think, for people who have a more traditional view of the cosmology. But I mean, what are we gonna do about it? We're just gonna sit here and ride it out, right?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna watch with interest and keep trying to make art that points to something worth suffering over, right? So, like, I mean, just to try to break out of this like pattern, like of music. I mean, people complain all the time about like, oh, Cardi B's lyrics, or like, or this little Nas X thing that just happened, and or like even Drake. Like, I mean, they'll complain about everybody to me, and it's like, all right, like, people are going to use whatever you give them to arrest someone else's attention.
Mhm.
And so a story I've told this on other podcasts, is I had a choir director who, when we would get way out of hand and we weren't listening, he would yell sex to get our attention. And every teenager would be like, sex where? Like, everybody's looking to see what's going on. So it's like, yeah, hello, like, you talk about your nether regions on the radio, and it's going to be hard to ignore, and it's going to get your attention. And guess what? These things are going to provoke a feeling in you. Sometimes it's going to be offense, or it might be a little mixture. It's like, oh, I kind of like this and I kind of don't like it. Like, and so it's like, that's not the concern for me, like, as much as how we got there is that the interpretive structure in art to show like the nature of reality and how life collects beauty, how beauty is collected through these lenses and in these ears, and how we really see meaning out there, is gone. Nobody knows how to tell that story, or knows how to tell it in any way that they can ever fit it into a song. So they just resort for whatever gets them the attention. And hopefully part of this new renaissance that seems to be coming, this like re-enchanting of this spirited world out there, where that people can tell the difference between, when they hear the word myth, they don't think fake. They could think, oh, like, myth could actually teach us in a condensed way about what's really happening. And as part of the, I mean, there's a mythical structure to Christianity that I think is just beautiful. Like, and it does a much better job of connecting me to the world around me than these other stories. And I don't feel like I have to resort to just some lower, like, vulgar, and I mean vulgar in a simple sense, not just a sexual sense, some like vulgar way of getting someone's attention through violence or conflict or sexuality. So I mean, that's the problem with the world. But for the people that can see it, it leaves the door wide open. Like, hopefully hopefully what's happening as the world kind of degrades into this cycle it's in right now, this lower cycle, that the people that really can see love for what it is and can discuss it and show it to people in songs and stir hearts and engage minds can start to shine and rise to the top, and something new will be born out of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's totally right, and I think it's interesting what's the internet, right, which seemed like this kind of totally negative, demonic force that brings the
Right.
worst out of people. But I wouldn't have came back to Greek orthodoxy without the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of people I've talked to that like so, and Abbott Trifon, he was on Facebook and he was talking about, well, we don't need to get off the internet, we need to use the internet because the demonic forces are using the internet, and like they exist, man. I don't have to always be hesitant of talking it like this. Like, okay, let's get over it. All right, if you want to think of it as in any way that you'd like to, there are forces which are disintegrating in nature that are applied and used, whether purposefully or unpurposely, to disintegrate community in a sense, because people benefit from that. And there's a small amount of people that benefit or not. And I don't know if it's done on purpose. It probably is somewhat and somewhat not on purpose, but there are unifying forces, symbolic forces, and there are diabolic forces happening, right? And we want to call them whatever you want to call it. You can still recognize the pattern that's happening, observe it, and talk about it in a sense, and I think that's important. Yes. And I think it's important to do that and not be hesitant or reticent to have conversations where like the whole idea of this Christianity is dead, and churches have died because we've stopped talking about angels and demons. Like, we stopped talking about the enchantment of Christianity. So I always find myself, when I get into this area of conversation, to like hold back and not talk about this stuff. No, talk about it. Okay, like let's talk through it in a sense. So I want to have more conversations like that. And I think you see all these people coming into the Lord of Spirits podcast through the symbolic world, and it's really given people a lens to even really sophisticated minded people, scientific minded people, I guess I meant to say, to look at this in a coherent way. And it's coherent,
Mm-hmm. It's a very intelligent movement too. The people that seem to be involved in it seem to have like a special type of insight in what would normally be a heartless intellectual within a different narrative. It's a very interesting community. I guess we're just calling it the re-enchantment community right now. But the joke I make is like, people are arguing over like, this polemic political world is like, what, are you going to be red pilled? It's like, or blue pilled. It's like, what are you going to blue pill or red pill? It's like, no, man, we need like the ultraviolet pill. Right. Like, we need to see the light, the things that people can't see again, that we've lost sight of, that we just have dead trees and mountains that are just simply rocks that got pushed up over time by tectonic plates. And we have, moisture that condenses as clouds. Like, it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just, they're just bleh. And so really we've lost, there's like all these colors we can't see anymore, and people are starting to feel the lack of it and point to where the lack is coming from, and they're looking for it. And some people it's going to get weird, because people are going to go to strange places. You might meet a Thor worshiper in the next decade. Like, you don't know where people are, how they're going to try to reconnect to this. But that is, you're right. It's one of the upsides of the internet. So like, all technology comes out with this promise, and then it goes to hell in a handbasket immediately. And then people sort it out again. Right. So like, that's part of the Christian narrative, and always has been, is the idea that there's these fallen principalities and fallen angels that are whispering things into the imagination of inventors. And we're engaging this technology before we're ready for it, right? Before mankind is really able to use it, and we end up just stabbing each other with it for a while, and then it settles down. Like, I mean, swords aren't a huge problem these days, but there was swords were a big problem at first. Like, if you were the guys that had the swords, the other people didn't, it was a problem. So the people with the swords won. And so that's kind of how technology functions in general. So, I mean, I'm not a technophobe. At the same time, I think that people should be very leery of, and not just so quick to embrace and accept anything that makes their life more comfortable. I mean, the idea that you were brought here for a comfortable life, and that's what's really going to make you the strongest, best contributor to this world, I think that's a big mistake. And if you don't like being uncomfortable, you're going to buy anything you could buy anything. Like, I mean, as someone who's done marketing, it's like, yeah, you will buy anything from us if I tell you it'll solve that problem, because you can't be bored, and you can't be uncomfortable, and you can't be uneasy. And the other side of this whole thing, when we're talking about this sort of dull universe we built, we're really suffering as far as on the human connectedness to each other, depression, anxiety, and two, like we're being forced into this world where like we don't know how to fix the problem, so we're being asked to, in the public, to therapeutically confirm every decision someone makes, even if it's not good for their health, even if it will lead to the elimination of their family or sterility in the future. No matter what it is, we're supposed to treat that for therapeutic reasons. Is our job as a society to make people feel like everything they're doing and everything they are, the things they can't help, or they're overeating, they're over drinking, their sexual desires, whatever it is, we're supposed to be like, no, you go, and like, no shame, right? There's only shame for someone who would shame someone. And I'm like, that's going to crumble so fast. Like, everybody knows you can't just look in the mirror and tell yourself you're fine the way you are, because your conscious is going to, the reality of your conscious is going to fight that, no matter how many people you ask to repeat that over and over again to you. So that's the other great part about being part of these like artists and people and thinkers who are having this conversation about re-enchanting the world. So people look out the window and see something they're connected to, and something that they're not nihilistic about, that they actually have a place in this world, and there's meaning behind everything, even the suffering, even the handicaps they've been given. It's all part of a bigger story. And if you understand how to pursue real value and start to understand the incredible place you've been carved out in this world and the potential for that, that is going to help a heck of a lot more than us just trying to tell you, no, you look great. Like, you're just as beautiful as anyone, even though you're like 4 minutes away from cardiac arrest or stroke, right? Yeah. So,
live your best life, right? Live your best life.
But what I just said sounds mean, like, to people now. It's like they've been so programmed that our job is to just go around and tell each other these things and follow the script. Like, that's going to help. And if you step outside of it and you have any concern for people, it's like, no, they're going to feel better when they start to actually be better. Like, you're not going to respect yourself if you're constantly violating your own conscience. You're not going to be able to love other people if you're struggling with this dichotomy and this duality in your head, this cognitive dissonance that you think you can overcome with just positivity or positive words. It's not going to work, and it's going to make you sad. And I think that's why people are starting to light up to meaning and mythology and fairy tales, and these things that used to be ridiculous are actually just a condensed understanding of the patterns of reality and how to pursue beauty with a capital B within it. And I think it's a lot easier for someone in a tradition like you and I are in, because there is this mythological structure. There is this idea that we were meant for something more, that we're being called, like the Bible says, to be sons of God, equal to angels, like something so much more than just a person who's bumbling along trying to make themselves happy. And I think the world is starting to feel the lack of that and the lack of connectedness. So I'm excited to see what happens and what kind of artists and what kind of art people are going to make. And because we're at such a low point right now for beauty and meaning and good storytelling and good music, that it's hopefully this is the valley and we're about to start climbing back up that hill of meaning.
Beautifully said, man. After, the fundamental pattern is after a death, there's a resurrection, right?
That's right.
I think we're, you're seeing a lot of institutional structures are gone or melted away. It's alarming to see it happen, right? But you can either pay attention to the falling debris, or you can pay attention to the light shining through, right? It's the new, in a sense. So, it's, I think we can leave it there, man. I think that's a good place to stop. I think.
Hopefully, hopefully people like, we can put down the distractions long enough to see again. Like, hopefully we can. Like, it's so hard, man. It's so hard for me. I know better. And it's so hard for me to get off my phone sometimes, or like not to like revert to like a 14-year-old state where I want to play video games on a day off. It's like, I have to fight that because but if you fight it back long enough, it starts to make sense why you're fighting it back. But you have to say no to the protesting body, or your protesting mind that wants to be entertained long enough to see this. So hopefully people can pull that out of our conversation. We talked about we were all over the map and talked about some wild stuff, but I kind of like this format. And I like that about longer form discussions, is that we can just get on without an agenda and dish.
Yeah.
Can I say a couple of small things? Because people might have heard what I've talked about and know nothing about it.
Please.
I'm holding a CD in my hand, not on purpose. This is, we just released a new record. My band name is Dirt Poor Robins. It's a great way to get introduced to us because there's a new single on there, and then it's a compilation of all our most popular tracks. And I put that out while I'm making a film right now in another record. So if you wanted to see the kind of work I've been involved in, and if you're interested in symbolism, mythological patterns, or mythologization of even the news, check our band out. So it's cinematic, it's a rock band, but we just put a record out, and I think it's great that James had me on at this exact moment. It just came out today, so I don't know when this will air, but it's still fresh and waiting for you from the oven. So that was my shameless plug.
Yeah.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to James' channel if you're watching this. If you come in, you're following me. I'm sorry about the discussion was so religious, but that's who I am. So that's it. But follow his channel. He's got great content. He'll read to you.
I will.
These are
read
things
to you.
You can't say yourself. And so smash that like button, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, the red subscribe button below.
Help the algorithm.
Yeah, and definitely follow the Rooster's Crow podcast.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you. Now I'm gonna put links to all of this good stuff, which I can't highly recommend enough. Onto this content, and in my intro I'll be able to plug it a little earlier too, because I think the ones that are still with us here are really the ones that are on board anyways.
Even your kids are tired of the conversation at this point.
Yeah, man, they're about the I Am Legend back there. So
yeah, I know I got that happen in my house too, probably. So
all right, man, well, I appreciate your time and your energy, my brother.
You got it.
Next time.
You got it.
I mean, God bless.
All right.